Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing another guide for League of Legends. I'm the Strategy Professor, and special thanks to Seth for sponsoring this guide with a generous $20 donation. Actually, I think it might have been $25. That's a really generous donation. So we're going to be talking about Vel'Koz today and how you can succeed with Vel'Koz in solo queue. You can find access to this Google Doc in the description to this video, so you can follow along if you'd like, or if you don't have time to watch the entire video, you can always just go through and just skip around and find your favorite parts. But we're going to first off start talking about why AP supports in general are strong in solo queue, why Vel'Koz is a pretty good pick in solo queue. Then we'll talk about sort of popular comparisons for Vel'Koz versus other popular AP champions, how to lane as Vel'Koz, how to teamfight as Vel'Koz, and then I'm just going to link you to a guide playlist. You can see the other guides that I have to offer and a coaching playlist. If you're interested in that as well, you can sort of see what coaching is like on the channel to get that more individualized touch for how to improve your own game. First off, let's go ahead and start with why AP supports are strong right now. So a major reason that AP supports are strong is because they can compensate for weakness in other lanes more so than perhaps any other style of support. And so if you have that top laner that goes 0-5, just can't build any damage, they have to switch over to go and tank, and all of a sudden your team is just lacking enough damage to really win team fights, that's where AP supports step in, and they can do quite a lot of damage. And autofill this season, Season 7, as of this video, it's 7.6. Autofill creates a lot of problems, a lot of matchup problems. So, you know, if someone gets autofilled top and they only have 5 games as a top laner, maybe they usually play jungle and mid, and they're playing against someone who has 200 games under their belt as top laner, it's very highly likely that your teammate's going to lose the lane. And so autofill makes it much more likely that people are going to underperform. Now, yes, that happens to the enemy team as well, but the overall message is there's a lot of variance in games, which means there's just a lot of random stuff that can happen. People just randomly feed more than they did last season because of autofill. So yes, it happens to the enemies, but it's also going to happen to you. And playing something like an AP support gives you that stability of knowing that you're going to have enough damage to pull through in the mid to late game to win some of these team fights and close out games. So that's why playing a damage type of support is really popular. And AP is really the only viable path. There aren't a lot of good AD supports. Yeah, I know people have been floating around the idea of Ashe, and Misfortune was popular last fall. It's just not quite there, especially in terms of itemization. So AP supports are your best bet. Now, AD champions are still very popular in the jungle and top, and they have been all season. So, you know, you see things like Fiora, Riven, Gangplank, and then in the jungle, Rengar, Graves, Kha'Zix. There's starting to be a little bit more diversity in terms of AP champions top and jungle, such as Rumble Top's a really good example, or like Zac or Evelyn in the jungle. But by and large, it still is primarily an AD jungle and top, and that means that having an AP support balances out your damage so that the enemy can't just stack armor and completely ignore you, especially if you have someone who goes an AD mid. So if you have someone who wants to go, you know, Riven top, and someone else who wants to go Zed mid, and then you got your Graves jungle, well, if you don't pick an AP support, they can just stack a bunch of armor, and it's going to be really hard to overcome that in the late game, especially now that they have nerfed lethality, and a lot of people just aren't building really high damage armor penetration to begin with. A lot of people are building Blade the Ruined King builds and a bunch of other stuff that's just not going to be able to cut through armor in the late game. So having an AP support ensures that you have an AP threat on your team, particularly if you know that your top and your jungle are going to build AD. Then it can be really important to do that. Even if you do have an AP mid, sometimes it's still important to have 2 threats that are AP. So let's say that you have, I don't know, like an Orianna mid who does okay, but just doesn't quite have enough damage in the mid game to really dissuade people from stacking armor. Just having that little bit of extra AP can be very helpful. Also, AD champions are still relatively weak in the early game, with the possible exception of Lucian. He can be strong if he builds the right items. Most of them don't, and most of the time he's not really that strong for the first little bit. So what that means that having an AP support allows you to pressure. That allows you to do damage and really bully your lane quite a lot, because the ADs just can't fight back. You know, with that Ezreal building tier, and the Lucian building Blade the Ruined King, and the Ashe building Blade the Ruined King, and just everyone going on and on about that item, means they're not really going to be able to fight you back in most circumstances early on. So if you can do a lot of early harassment with an AP champion, then you can potentially gain a pretty sizable CS lead in the bot lane, which will help you transition better into the mid and the late game. Okay. Also, bottom lane has a lot of pressure and AP from junglers typically. And if you're an AP support, sometimes you can even turn around ganks. Like you'll see one here in just a little bit when I show you some footage from a Vel'Koz play where we get jumped on by a Zac and a bunch of people are low and panicking and running, and I'm able to do a lot of damage and turn it around because I'm Vel'Koz. Whereas if I wasn't Vel'Koz or I wasn't an AP support, then I may not be able to turn that around and they may have dominated us. So AP supports allow you to fight better in the early game and in the late game sometimes. And so that makes them particularly strong. Also, tanks are not very popular at most positions right now. Now, Vel'Koz is actually pretty good at tanks, at taking down tanks because of his true damage, which we'll talk about here in a second. So if we transition to a tank meta and you want to play an AP support, then he will be the premier AP support against tanks. But even if people are not playing tanks, he still does an obscene amount of damage if you play him correctly. And so he's going to be really good against squishies also. And poke is not really popular right now. They've, nerfed Varus. They've nerfed a lot of other champions. People aren't playing Ziggs as much. So they've nerfed a lot of champions that do poke damage. And so having a champion on your team that can soften up the enemy before you engage with poke can actually be quite useful, especially one that has a lot of burst damage like Vel'Koz. So not only does he poke, but he also just has a lot of burst and some pretty good sustained damage as well. So that offers an extra layer of versatility to your team comps that I guess Ezreal is popular and he pokes, but that's about it that I can think of. Varus still gets played some, but either way, poke is a very useful commodity to have, especially if it's bundled with really high team fight damage. And Vel'Koz offers both of those. So that's a nice little touch for Vel'Koz. Okay, so let's talk about Vel'Koz specifically here. So why Vel'Koz? Why not, Zyra? Why not Brands? Like, in which situations should you play Vel'Koz, and what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? So let's first off just go to the Vel'Koz main page, League Wikia, which I always recommend. This has very reliable, good, detailed information about League of Legends, and it's free always. They have these little ads on the side, but whatever. It's a great resource. Let's talk about what Vel'Koz does. Okay, first of all, he has pretty good move speed, 340. It's better than some of the other supports that you might play. Might have lower, especially some of the range supports, might even get as low as like 330 depending on what you're playing. So 340 is pretty good. That's going to let you get away from a lot of things. Really low health, so be aware of that. Really low mana regeneration, which is interesting. A lot of AP supports don't have that 12 mana regen that you'll get with someone like a Janna or a Sona or a Soraka, but his spells are still very cheap, so they're still very spammable, even though you only have the 6 base mana regen. If you've never thought about why base mana regen matters, if you get a Fairy Charm, that's 25% of your base mana regen. So each Fairy Charm that you get at a low level will only give you 1.5 mana per 5. Whereas if you have that 12 mana regen, then it would give you 3 mana per 5. So in other words, the mana regeneration abilities that you'll get on like Eye of the Watcher or any other type of mana regen items that you might get are twice as effective on someone like Janna or Soraka. That's why it looks like they never run out of mana compared to someone like Vel'Koz, who potentially can run out of mana. So that's important to think about. He is ranged technically. He has 300 or 525 range, so his tentacles are deceptively okay at auto attacking. So you might be able to sneak in some autos against someone like a Lucian, but in general, you want to play pretty far back. You're just not really designed to be a close range champion. Although you do have good all-in potential if you hit your E, which we'll talk about here in a second. And relatively low armor, so once again, you shouldn't be trying to get auto attacks in there unless it's an all-in fight and they're diving you or your AD carry. Just don't try to go up and auto him. It's just not going to be worth it. You have too low a range and you just don't have a lot of ways to defend yourself if they decide to engage on you. Okay, so organic deconstruction. So this is the sort of the key component to Vel'Koz here. You want to trigger these organic deconstructions. They are very, very powerful. So each time Vel'Koz hits an enemy with an ability, they get 1 tick, and then when you get up to 3 ticks, then it activates and does a lot of true damage to an enemy. Now your auto attacks don't add any ticks to it, but they do refresh the ticks. So in a team fight, if people are diving your AD carry, you still want to be landing autos just because you want damage, but also because that keeps the organic deconstruction ticks going. So you deal 33 to 170, 169 based on your level, and then 50% AP ratio as true damage. Now that's a really, really high AP ratio for something that does true damage. That's really high on a passive that basically has no cooldown. It's a 0.25 cooldown. So I did some math for you here just to show you how powerful that is. Okay, there we go. So it does have a small 0.25 second cooldown. So you can deconstruct enemies to be very effective, and you need to be doing this. The 0.5 is really high. So for an example, let's say that you do 100 AP damage against a 42 magic resist target. So that's pretty common. That's basically an AD carry that has a full blue page of magic resist against the Vel'Koz, which would probably be pretty standard. So if you did 100 AP damage, you would only do 70 damage to that champion. It's going to reduce it by about 30%. Whereas if you did 100 true damage, it's going to deal 100 damage. So that means you're doing 42% more damage than you would do if you just hit them with normal AP. That's a lot. That's a lot of extra damage. So at level 9, just a common scenario, let's say that you have 100 AP, so, you know, you've taken a rune page that has, what would that, like, 25 AP, then you get Eye of the Watchers for an additional 25, that'll take you to 50, and then, you know, you've maybe got a Haunting Guise or something that'll take you back up to, I think, 75, and then you have a couple more shuffled in there somewhere, you get to about 100 AP after all the masteries, runes, and just having a few items. Will grant you. So level 9, 100 AP, you're going to deal 147 true damage because you're going to get 50 from the scaling on your deconstruction, and then your deconstruction itself is going to give you 97 for being level 9. So that's going to be roughly equivalent to 210 AP damage against a 42 magic resist target. That's a lot. That's a passive that does 210 AP damage at level 9 with virtually no AP, or a very low amount of AP, on something that only has a 0.5 cooldown. So you could trigger this like twice in a fight. You know, if you hit someone with a Q, get both procs off of your W, hit someone with your E, get both procs off of your W. You know, that right there is going to give you, you know, 410 potential damage. What would be a 410 AP? I mean, that's an ultimate right there. A lot of ultimates do 410 AP damage. So that's a lot of damage. And you can proc it on multiple people. This isn't single target. So each person that you hit with this, like let's say that you hit 3 people with your W, and then you hit those same 3 people with your E and knock them up, for example. That would trigger it, and then 3 more people with your W, and then ult them, and then that'll trigger it again on all those people. So depending on different situations, this can be extremely good in terms of your overall damage. So you can proc it several times in a fight, often dependent on how well you use your W for the double procs, or for the double stack. And then your charges do drop off after you do a full proc, and you have to wait 0.5 seconds to charge it again. But it's still very strong. And if you ever wondered just how magic resist works, I went ahead and left you the link here. I've described this in numerous videos. It's the same way that armor works. You can actually see the equation and how all that goes down. Now, I do the math for you in the video, but if you're just curious about how to do your own math and think about different things, then this explains it very, very well. And it explains you the optimal efficiency, when you should get magic resist, when you should get health, when you should get penetration, versus flat magic damage. It's a very, very good article. So I highly recommend, if you're a very analytical person, you want to learn more, to watch this. Or to read this. I also have a whole video about it on the channel if you want to watch sort of how itemization works. And it's in my frequently asked questions. So be sure to check that out. I can actually go, let me just go ahead and grab it really quick. That way I can leave a link here for you. instead of just mentioning it, because I know some people don't want to sit there and read an article. You'd rather hear me talk about it, or at least read my Google Doc, which sort of summarizes what's going on about it. So let me go ahead and just share that. Okay, there you go. I'll make that a bit more accessible for you, if you're curious. Like I said, I do the math for you, but I know some people would like to do the math themselves and play around with different scenarios, and so it's, you know, it's right there. It explains really well how it works, and my itemization video also explains pretty well how it works. Okay, so Vel'Koz's Q is very, very cost efficient. This is another perk to Vel'Koz, is that it only costs 60 mana at level 5, and it deals 240 damage with a 0.6 ratio. So 0.6 is kind of average, you know, AP scaling, but the base is really high. 240 for 60 mana. That's excellent. That's a 4-to-1 payout ratio. You don't see that hardly ever on offensive spells. Usually it's a 2-to-1, or sometimes a 3-to-1 is a pretty good deal, but this is a 4-to-1 relative to how much mana you pay for how much damage it can deal. And it can hit multiple targets too. Each split of it can hit a different person, so it's not common for that to happen, but it could happen. It also slows them for 70 seconds for up to 2.6 seconds. Now that does decay, so it's not 70 for the whole time, but that's a really powerful slow. Makes it very easy for your allies to hit skill shots like a Gen W, or to drop a Caitlyn trap near them, or to hit them with an Ash arrow, or to channel a Misfortune ult on them, or to channel your ult on them, or to land your E after you hit a Q on them. So there are lots of really nice perks to having a slow on that much damage in particular. It also has a huge range. 1050 is a very, very long range, and the split works pretty well too. So there are different strategies to using this Q correctly. I personally like to throw it straight at them, because most people try to fade forward, dodge it. Then if you press Q again, then it will break and hit them early. So you can press Q once, it'll go to its full length unless you press Q again, and then once you press it, then it splits. I have a video that shows you, so it looks like a T. It goes up, splits, goes out, and anyone that it hits, it does its damage to. So it's a unique skill shot. Some people try to throw it at angles and try to hit people with these diagonal angles, but that can be okay. I don't know. There are different strategies to throwing it, either at angles, but I think that the further away it is from them, the easier it is for them to dodge. So if you throw it at like a wide angle and they're over here, kind of like a triangle, they're going to have more time to watch it going here, go over here, and then have more time to dodge as it splits and goes out like that. So if you're trying to hit them with this triangular motion, then that's going to be a lot easier for them to dodge, rather than if you throw it straight at them, because that takes away one more avenue they can run. So they can't run straight forward. They have to run like diagonally to the side to dodge it. And when they do that, then it's going to be much closer to them. So if you throw it straight at them and they have to run like right here diagonally to the side, then when you split it, it's going to be right next to them, and it's going to be a lot harder for them to hit. Whereas if you threw it way over here and tried to split it and go diagonally this way, then they have the option of just stepping forward to dodge it. And they have a lot more time. Like this distance is much longer than, you know, this distance from like here to here. I know my illustration is super accurate there. Let me just, I'll pull up a map and just show you what I'm talking about here. To show you some common scenarios. I won't dwell on this too much, but I know this is a topic of debate, and people will say, oh, well, why aren't you throwing your stuff at this diagonal angle? And I say, because it makes it easier for them to dodge often. Now, it depends. Like I said, there are times when you want to throw it diagonally, but okay, so let's say that you're right here, and you've got to choose. You can either throw it like straight at them, like let's say there's someone like right here, throw your Q straight at them, or you can try to throw it like at an angle here and split it and get it to come over here. If you throw it straight at them, and they're right here, they're gonna have to either run back to dodge, which if they're within your range, it's harder to do. That's what most people will do, is they'll run back, and you know, sometimes you're just out of range. But let's say you're within range, they're going to have to dodge. Like the only option for them is to dodge diagonally forward like this, which is what most people will do if they're too close to run back. And so when they dodge diagonally forward like this, and you're throwing it right up here, and you split it, it's going to be really close to them right here when you hit it. So it's going to make it much harder for them to dodge, because it's basically right in their face when you split it and hit them. Whereas if you throw it like angled this way and they're standing right here, you throw it over here to try to get the cute like diagonal angle on them, then they're going to have much more time, because this distance here between like here and say here, when you split it, is a much longer distance, and they can just walk forward to dodge it. That's a much longer distance than here to here. So like this little area, kind of the hot zone, that's a much shorter distance where they would move than here. So I think that means that in general you want to throw it straight at them and force them to move forward diagonally, because it makes it much easier to hit. But some people will tell you to try to throw it diagonally around creep waves and things like that. I mean, you can try that. I personally, it does catch people off guard sometimes. It does have a longer split. It gets to 1100 instead of 1050, as you can see here. But you're really not gaining that much additional benefit by throwing it diagonally, other than an element of surprise and catching people off and stuff like that. So you can throw it diagonally, but I think you should try to prefer throwing it straight at them if you can, and then manually splitting it when they move diagonally down. Okay, so that's Q. It's a really strange skill shot, but if you just practice it, just try throwing it straight at them, and if you have to split it, then you have to split it, and that's fine. You do get extra mana if you kill things on hit with it, which is okay. It's not really going to matter for support, although that can be useful if you want to try to last hit creeps in the middle. If you're playing mid lane with Vel'Koz, and that could be useful. Void Rift, also 1050 range, so this is about the same as Plasma Fission. Actually, it's literally the same as the straight cast of Plasma Fission. It's also fairly cheap. Although if you start casting both of these in conjunction, you can run yourself out of mana pretty quickly. You can store up to 2 charges, and it takes a while to land a charge, and it has a static cooldown of 1.5. So you can only cast it once every 1.5 seconds, although you can store 2 charges. And what this does, and you'll see it in the video clip we'll show here in a second, is it throws out one little purple line on the ground. If that hits them, they get a stack of deconstruction. And then after 0.25 seconds, if they stand in it, then it detonates again, adds another stack of deconstruction. So the main benefit of this spell is that it stacks 2 deconstructions, which can be quite powerful. And it does pretty good damage too. I mean, that's a 0.4 ratio, which is not amazing, but it's okay. And 275 total damage if you have it maxed out, which this would not be your first max. The Q is your first max. This might be your second max, or the E. I tend to like to max it second, but you know, some people max E second. Okay. Tectonic Disruption. So this is 850 range, so pretty good. And you throw like a little bolt basically that explodes. I'm not sure the exact radius. It's pretty close. It's not a very like large area of effect. But it knocks people up in the air for 0.75 seconds. And they can potentially get knocked back slightly if they're really close to Vel'Koz. So this is how you set up your combo if you're going for an all-in. So the standard combo would be you would try to hit them with a Q. If you hit them with the Q, they're going to get slowed. Then you should be able to land your Tectonic Disruption and then hit them with a Void Rift, and that would proc deconstruction. You know, a more bold move would be hit them with Tectonic first and then cast your Void Rift. It's going to trigger one set of deconstruction off of both of those, and you throw your Q at them. By the time your Q hits them, it'll probably stack another deconstruction after it's refreshed after that 0.5 seconds, and then you hit them with another Void Rift while they're slowed, and then you can get 2 stacks of deconstruction. So E plus W plus Q plus W is your maximum double deconstruction combo that you can do. And typically you'll only want to do that if the enemy has already crowd controlled them. So they've hit them with an Ash Arrow, or you know, they've hit them with a Gen W or something like that. So that's like the super greedy one. The standard combo will probably be, you know, as I've said before, the Q. Once you hit them with the Q, then try to hit them with 2 procs of the Void Rift while they're slowed. And that's just kind of a standard trade mechanism in lane. And you hold on to the Tectonic Disruption. We'll talk about that during the laning phase. You really want to make sure you're 100% going to hit them with this, and that you're not going to get attacked yourself, because this is your only self-peel that you have. And it's decent. I mean, if you do a Tectonic Disruption and then drop a Void Rift on them in an ult, you know, that's quite a bit of damage. Okay, so let's see. So yeah, pretty good. Good protection. Now, the final sort of thing that people know most about Vel'Koz probably is his ultimate and how much damage it does. It does a lot, but I don't think people quite understand just how much damage it does under the right circumstances. It's insane. Okay, so 1550 range. This is massive. Like, you can cast this from all sorts of like hidden spots around the map where you're outside of vision and people just won't even see it coming. So after you deconstruct an enemy, which means you get all 3 procs on somebody, then it marks them as researched for 7 seconds. So if you land a full deconstruction on somebody, then they get this debuff of researched. All right, so Vel'Koz channels this ult. It looks like a huge laser for 2.5 seconds, and you can move it around. It's very slow to move around. Like, you wheel very slowly. It's not super responsive. So ideally you want to shoot this in a relatively straight line where things aren't going to be jumping around or moving that much. Like, you can correct it a little bit, but you want to keep it basically right where you point it as much as possible. Because whenever you have to move it around, you're losing ticks on people a lot of times, and it doesn't rotate very fast, as I said before. And it does damage every 1/4 of a second, so it's up to 10 ticks for 2.5 seconds if someone sits in the entire thing. It also slows them for 20% for 1 second when they're hit, so you don't need to get a Rylai's or anything like that. You already have a slow on it. There's no point. Because remember, Rylai's also does a 20% slow and they don't stack. So do not get Rylai's on Vel'Koz. This slows and your Q slows. And this stuns. So the only benefit for having a Rylai's would be it would allow your Void Rift to slow people. And that's just, it doesn't matter. Everything else already slows or stuns people. So if they have the research on them debuff, then they take true damage. That is a lot of true damage. So I did some math for you here. The base spell at level 3, so that's as high as it gets, it does 800 damage on a single ability with a 1.25 AP ratio, which is pretty massive. Wait, is that even? Yes, because it's 12. Or it's, yeah, 12.5% AP. Oh, wait, it's more than that. I calculated it with 12. Let me see. No, I did it right. It's 125. Okay. I can't do math, I promise. Okay, so all of that can be true damage. So let's say that you only have 100 AP that late in the game for some reason, and you're versus a 42 MR target. That true damage would equal roughly 1,320 AP damage because of what it's cutting through. Now, I'd say a more realistic scenario, let's say you have 200 AP, kind of this late game scenario. 200 AP is about right for a support, depending on the items that you get. And you're against a 100 magic resist target. So let's say you're against something that has a Spirit Visage, or a Locket, or, you know, just some kind of magic resistance. Maw Malmortius, well, that's going to prevent more damage. But anyways, a 100 magic resist target, that's going to equal 2,100 AP damage on a single spell. And this can deal this damage to multiple people. Like, that's one of the highest damage spells in the whole game. If we compare this to something like a Lux Laser, and Lux is pretty easy to compare to Vel'Koz. They're both very long range. They both have, you know, a single stun type of thing. You compare this to a Lux Laser. That does 500 magic damage and has a 0.75 AP ratio. So if you thought Lux Laser was a terror, if you're just like, oh man, Lux Laser does way too much damage, if you get hit with this Vel'Koz thing, that's going to be about the equivalent of taking 2,100 damage because of how the true damage functions. So just imagine getting hit by 4 Lux Lasers at once. Like, that's just how much damage this is going to do if you sit in a true damage Vel'Koz ult. It's going to absolutely, like, 100 to 0 basically anybody. So yeah, that's a lot of damage. And that's like not including getting hit with anything else. Like, that's not including getting hit with a Q or a W or the deconstruction true damage itself. I mean, the deconstruction damage is going to be, what, 100? It's going to be, well, let me just see what it'll be. So getting deconstructed by Vel'Koz right there in that scenario would be 100 true damage, and if you're level 16, 150. It's 253 true damage. So that's an additional, like, 500 damage against a 100 magic resist target. So this doesn't even include proccing the deconstruction itself. Like, that would take it up to another, like, 2,600, 2,700 AP worth of damage. And, you know, getting hit by a Q easily puts it over 1,000. It's just obscenely powerful. This is the highest. It might be literally the highest damage potential in the game if you sit in a full disintegration ray when it's dealing true damage. It's a lot of damage. Now I'm curious if this would actually work on like a Baron. Marks him as researched. It says enemies. I mean, I wouldn't recommend melting a Baron like this, but you know, if you deconstruct it, like, and you really need to take that thing down fast, it only has an 80-second cooldown. I guess in theory you could use this to deal, you know, the 2,000 true damage to Baron or whatever. Which, I mean, that'll burn it down pretty quick. I don't know. That's interesting. I never thought of that use before. So try it in normals before you try it in ranked. But if you really need to like burn down that Baron as fast as humanly possible, and people are running at you really quickly, or if you want to try to steal the Baron and they don't have smite, or even if they do have smite and you think you know they might miss it, because this checks every 0.25 seconds. So if they smite even like a little bit early, and you're getting this true damage, then you're going to snag it from them. So if they smite and there's just, you know, 100 damage left on it, let's say they smite 100 early or whatever, anywhere between, you know, 0 to 100 early, then you're probably going to get it. Because it checks every 0.25 seconds, which is so fast on the check. I don't know. That's an interesting thing, is that you could use it to melt down either Barons or Dragons if you had to. Although, once again, you want to save it primarily for team fights. That seems like that could be on the table, because it says that does apply to Barons and Dragons also. Okay, so tons of damage. That's how you use the abilities. Like he's based around landing those combos, getting the proccing his passive, deconstruction, and then landing the disintegration ray and just completely melting teams. Now that disintegration ray, remember, still does quite a respectable lot of damage, even if you don't get the full deconstruction first. And it does also stack deconstruction every 0.7 seconds, which is kind of weird. It's like every 3 normal ticks it'll do a deconstruction. So for instance, if you hit someone with a Q, you hit them with 1 proc a W, but then they walk out of it before they take the second proc a W, you can go ahead, queue this up. And I'm not sure if it starts off with a tick, or if you have to wait the 0.7 seconds before a tick. But either way, the disintegration ray itself can start ticking. So even if it starts off on the 3rd tick, it gives you the true damage. And those first 3 ticks would be magic damage, and then the remaining 7 ticks would be true damage. So it does help you out a little bit by giving you a couple of extra deconstruction stacks as you apply it. And then, I guess because it's 0.7 delayed, then it can actually stack up even more deconstruction. So if you land deconstruction, start this, then after 0.7, then that deconstruction is going to leave its cooldown, and then it'll start it up again. So maybe this could double deconstruct in the middle of it. Like you have 1 deconstruction, and then this gives you an extra deconstruction. That's actually pretty powerful, that you get an additional deconstruction in the middle of this. You get that extra 500 or 600 damage that I talked about before stacked on top of that. So that's actually really gross. That's a lot of damage. I hadn't even thought of that aspect of it before. Okay, so I went ahead and linked somebody here. Now that we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses, items, matchups, you know, runes, all of that good stuff. I want to show you a guy here that I found from a Niancy video. He's talking about good supports, and he said that he thought Bran and Vel'Koz could be really good, especially at bronze and silver. And he mentioned this one guy. That's another YouTuber that does content. So he mentioned this guy. I went ahead and pulled him up here. He is Liquid Painless. He's been a challenger since Season 4. And he plays a pretty good chunk of Vel'Koz. That's the 2nd most played character. And one of his most successful, right there with Brand. So I went ahead and looked at some different games that he does, some different builds that he has, kind of compared it to what I think. Now, this is how you should do an analysis if you're looking at other people to see what's good, what's strong, what's powerful. You want to look at high-level people, but think critically about why they're doing what they're doing. Like, why are they building that item? When are they picking this champion is important to ask. See if you can see patterns, like, why would they pick this champion right there? Like, do they pick it all the time? Do they pick it in a very specific matchups? Do they build a certain item all the time? Do they only build it in certain matchups? Do they only build it when they're losing or when they're winning? Do they only build it in combination with other champions? Do they only build it in certain elos? So he does play flex sometimes. It looks like he's 45% in his flex queue. But he does play flex with people too. So it's important to think, okay, this is a flex game. You know, this is a solo queue game. So does that influence why he's building certain items? Because his flex elo is much lower as Platinum 1 versus Challenger. So these are all important to think about. Let's just see kind of what he's doing here and what we can learn from this as we go forward. So most of the time he maxes his Q, which is what I recommend as well. So a point in each one of them. And it looks like he maxes his W second in the vast majority of games. Yes, he only gets 1 point in E, which is what I recommend as well. Yeah. Now there are some games down here, like this one he maxed his W and then his Q. So I'm not sure exactly like what's up with that. I mean, the thing I could think of here is that he's against a Karma Sivir and he's trying to counter that push. So they have really good push and Ezreal sucks at pushing. So he just leveled up his W so that he could match the push of Sivir and Karma to help Ezreal so they don't get pushed into their tower and just run out of the lane. So that seems like a special situation where they're against a really strong push lane and he just wanted to max his W to help with the push. Also, it's really hard to stick damage onto Sivir. She's just going to spell shield your Qs anyways. So maybe he thought there's not a lot of point in leveling up your Q here because you're just going to be giving Sivir more mana. So you might as well just push. And so I think that's probably what was going on there. Yeah, like here they have superior push. The Lucian, Vel'Koz naturally pushes more than Ezreal. In this one, Ashe naturally pushes better than Ezreal. So he seems to like to pick it into Ezreal. This one, Lucian's going to push better than Kog'Maw. Yeah. So most of the time you get your Q, but if you just happen to be against a Sivir and you just need some extra push, you might do that. He also planned his runes around that. So this one, he built some kind of funky runes. Where he got health per level, and then he got cooldown per level, and a little bit of magic resist. And the reason that he did this is because he knows they have no early game. They can't fight in the early game. Because it's Ezreal... Or no. Oh, okay. This one, he's middle. That's what it is. He's middle on this one. I missed the fact that they have a Nami there. Okay, so scratch all that. I think, in theory, what I just described makes sense. If you're against a Sivir, then you might want to take your W because you're just going to be giving her mana if you spam Qs at her. But this is why. This is his mid build. So that's why he has scaling stuff, because he's a mid laner. And that's why he got W, is because he wants to push in and roam faster, probably. Okay. So what else can we take away from this? All right, so he really likes Thunderlords. And it goes down to double-edged. I personally like Deathfire. I mean, obviously he's way better than I am, but you can take Thunderlords. I mean, this is going to give you more power in the early game if you land your 3 procs a lot. He also likes to go Green Fathers instead of Bandit, which is interesting. This one he went for Dangerous Game. This one he's mid lane. Now, he didn't play all Vel'Koz. I searched specifically for Vel'Koz, for his Vel'Koz games. And some of them are a bit older, too. So that's important to keep in mind, too, that he seems to have played Vel'Koz more in patches of the past. So, 13 or 14 days ago, that was, another patch ago. It was like 7.5. That was when he was playing a lot of Vel'Koz. But now, recently, he hasn't played it nearly as much. And so, when you're looking at stuff and trying to scout out information, it's important to think about that as well. Like, well, is this from the current patch, or did something change to where this person is not playing Vel'Koz nearly as much anymore? Important question to ask. But yeah, you can get... So Thunderlords is better for the early game. I think that if you're just going to go for poke, Deathfire is better for late game. I think the flat spell penetration is also better for later in the game rather than lethality, because you're not going to be landing that many autos. Certainly outside the laning phase, you're not going to land that many autos. So that's interesting to think about. So I recommend Deathfire Touch, but, obviously this guy's really good, and he recommends Thunderlords. Now, when you do land your full combo, you get 10% of your ability power as burst damage. Now keep in mind, now this only does 25% of your ability power. That does 10% of your ability. I really don't understand why he does this, other than if he just really wants lane dominance. 10% of your... Okay, so it does 10 damage per level. Okay, so if you're level 10, it'll do 100 damage plus 10% of your ability power. Whereas this is flat. 8 damage plus 25% of your ability power. It doesn't burst, though. It's over 4 seconds. But this can apply to everyone. So if you hit like 4 people with your death... with your life disintegration beam or whatever, then it's going to proc it on everybody. Whereas Thunderwards just happens once to the first person that you hit. So, I don't know. I personally think this is better, but Thunderlords is an option. As far as his itemization, we'll talk about items here in a second. In a lot of his games, he does go for Eye of the Watchers, which is what I recommend. Leandry's definitely what you want. You know, your Q is automatically going to proc the passive on Leandry's. So, and your so will your Deathfire Disintegration, because that also applies to slow. So you're going to get that double burn against movement impaired targets. So that's just a very natural fit that's amazing for Vel'Koz. And then you can kind of see some diversity. The most curious item that I see in a lot of his games is Locket. So I've been preaching the power of Locket for a very long time, but I haven't even gone as far as to put a Locket on an AP champion. But he seems to really like that, and that does give you extra team fighting capabilities. So you just get to press that, you know, instantly, shield your whole team for a ton. So you get that, and you get the nice defense of 30 armor, 30 magic resist, so you may not get blown up instantly if you get hit by something. So, you know, when he has to eat this Karthus ult, then having that extra shield plus the 60 magic resist is very helpful. So there against Karthus, that makes sense. Here, however, he's not against hardly any AP. He's against a Lulu top, a Lucian middle, an Ezreal bottom, and an Olaf middle. So virtually no AP, and he's still working towards Locket. So it looks like he thinks that even the shield itself, even though the magic resist is virtually worthless, the shield itself is still worth it. You want to play very far back as Vel'Koz also, so you're not really going to be close enough to activate this to hit everybody. At least not as close as you would with some supports. So it's a very curious build, but I think it's interesting, and I'm willing to try it out at some point. But you definitely want to get Boots 2 plus a 4 Ward Sightstone item. Now this one he got Frost Queen, so I'm not sure like what's up with that. Maybe that's to help him land his stuff more, or to help Lux land her stuff. I'm not sure. That's rare though. He almost never goes Frost Queen if you look down. Like occasionally he goes for a Frost Queen. But it's usually Eye of the Watchers. He does do Locket quite a bit. Either Leandry's, you see that mask almost every single time. Okay, and he likes Sork boots. Sork boots are the best, I think, in general. But I think that Boots of Swiftness are something that you should definitely consider, especially at lower elos, as we'll talk about here in a second. But that's because like you need to be able to position well and to reposition, and low elos are such a clown fiesta that sometimes it's very difficult to get a proper position to channel your ult. Another thing that I want to point out here also is the amount of control wards this dude buys. I think that's something that's often overlooked. He bought 12 control wards this game. So he bought 12 control wards. The jungler, X-Smithy, bought 9 control wards. The Ken in top lane bought 4 control wards. Ashe bought 2, and Orianna bought 1. And then enemy team, Afromu bought 8. Lucian, the mid laner, bought 5. Jungler bought 5. Top laner bought 2. This is really important to notice this. 5 control wards, 9 control wards, 7. 16 control wards. 16 control wards. Let that sink in. That is 1,200 gold that he spent on control wards in that game. 1,200 gold in a game that he's losing as an AP support. And he even got to 6 items eventually. in a 53-minute game. So eventually he stopped buying control wards. But that is 1,200 gold in a game that he's losing on control wards. I just want to point that out. And he placed 80 wards. 8-0 on his wards. He placed 80 wards in this game and had 16 control wards. That is off the charts warding. That's, I mean, and this is a challenger player. Because I've heard people say in the past, you know, the logic is, oh, I'm really far behind, so I need to buy more items to catch up. I don't have money for control wards. I've even heard somebody, like, some YouTubers say, well, you don't really need wards, especially in bronze or silver, because it's so much a Clown Fiesta. Who cares? You need to get more AP items. Like, I heard somebody, who was it? I think it was Valkyrin, who had a video that was called, like, My Last Fiesta, where he picked brand support, and it was Platinum 1, and he was saying everybody was so trash that he didn't even need to get a Sightstone. Because you just had to get a lot of AP to carry, like, your worthless teammates. Like, he wasn't that brutal, but that was what he was implying. He might have actually said stuff like that, but it probably was a little more measured than that. He probably wasn't that mean, but that was what he was implying, was he was saying everyone is just so bad that you don't need wards, you just need more AP. Well, the challenger support main here would beg to differ, even on a heavy AP champion. Like, this isn't like he's running Janna or, you know, something that's getting really cheap items where he can afford to just throw away 1,200 gold. Well, it's not a throwaway, but he can afford to invest 1,200 gold in control wards. These are expensive items. Like, this is very expensive. He needs gold for these items. And yet he still bought 16 control wards. So take note of that. I talk about this in all my coaching videos. I'm like, buy more control wards, buy more control wards. I mean, let me pull up mine really quick. I don't buy nearly as much as that in a lot of my games, but I definitely should try to buy more. But if, you know, I'm typically, you know, I bought 9 in this game, 4, 3, 3, 4, 5. So, you know, I'm clocking in at like 5 or 6, 7 in a lot of these games. So, you know, I'm clocking in at 5 or 6 per game. Now, he obviously doesn't do 16 in all of them, but I do more than virtually every other support in almost every game. It's like 80%, because sometimes, one time someone asked me when I was streaming, they're like, why don't you ever buy control wards or place them? I'm like, and then we went and looked at my thing, and I had placed more control wards than the enemy support 18 of the 20 games that we played. So he doesn't always buy that much, but, you know, he's clocking in at a lot, you know. More than me. I don't know what the average is. I haven't done the average, but it looks like he's clocking in at about 8. 7 or 8 per game. That's a lot. So, you know, I need to up my game. You know, everybody needs to up their game and buy more control wards. This is coming straight from the challenger support who plays mostly AP stuff, Vel'Koz and Brand. So, buy more control wards. Okay. All of us can learn from that. But anyways, so it looks like it's Liandry's plus Eye of the Watchers plus Locket in a lot of his games, which makes sense. I mean, I like Luden's also because it's really easy to charge that up and get that proc. Luden's is on the extra movement speed is also a nice defensive stat that helps you reposition and get to a good place where you can ult. And that it's really nice because you can keep spamming your Q and you're not going to waste it on stuff typically. So you're going to hit a champion with this eventually if you just keep throwing it. So Luden's is very good on poke champions. Morellonomicon is another one that's interesting. You don't typically have a lot of mana problems as Vel'Koz. The cooldown is nice. But you're primarily an all-in champion in a team fight. It's okay. I mean, if you need the Grievous Wounds, that would be why I would get it. They do have a Warwick, so it makes sense why he would get Grievous Wounds there. This one they have a Gragas. So that's why he got Morello. He doesn't get it all the time, but he got it because they had healing champions on the enemy team. See, this one... They don't have that many healers over here. I'm not sure. But he does have Locket a lot in a lot of these games. That seems to be his second most bought item, I think, next to Liandry's as a complete item. How many times does he buy Locket? Let's just see here. So he gets it 1... Or what, did he get it or was he building towards it? We got 1, 2, 3. He's building towards it here. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, and I can't tell. So 10 out of his 20 games, he was building towards a locket. He wanted a locket in the matchup. What's the next most popular item? It's probably Void Staff. He doesn't get Void Staff here. It's Ludens or Void Staff. Okay, so Ludens is 1. Ludens 2. Ludens 3. Ludens 4. Void Staff 1. Ludens 5. He even got a QSS in that game. He's very scared of that Ash Arrow. Void 2. He wanted a Void here. Void 3. So it looks like he does Ludens 4 or 5 times. It looks like it's about an equal split between Ludens and Void Staff. He doesn't get Hourglass that much. Sometimes he gets Hourglass. Sometimes he gets Morello. So it looks like the most core build that this guy gets is Leandri's Locket. Eye of the Watcher's Sork Boots. So that's curious. I'll have to try it out. I've never tried getting a Locket as the second item, but it looks pretty powerful. Okay, so I just wanted to go through a little bit there and just talk about some of the Challenger stuff. Hopefully that didn't take too long. But I think that's pretty insightful to think about and look at. And I'll try to do that with more guides if I can find a high-level Challenger. It might be hard depending on who the support is to fish that out. But thanks to Niancy. Be sure to check out his channel. He's a great guy. I don't remember if I have it over here or not. But I'll pull him up really quick. I'm not going to click on his channel because I don't want to get like a copyright infringement or anything. This guy, or N-E-A, Niace. So yeah, Niace, check this guy out. Pretty cool. He has some pretty good content. A little bit of a different personality than me, but he has some great stuff on there. So special thanks to him for pointing that out, and that really helped me with the research for this video. So go check him out. Cool guy. All right, so what are Vel'Koz's strengths? What are some of his weaknesses? So he has very long range, as I described before. So you have a lot of poke. You can all in from a very safe distance from dangerous team fights. He's very cost efficient with his harass. So remember, if we look at someone like Lux, your harass pattern with Lux would be something like probably throw your E just to damage him if you don't land your Q. But tossing this E is 130 mana at level 5. 130 mana for 240 damage. Whereas remember, old Vel'Koz here, your Q is your harassment, and it's only 60 mana to do the same damage. With the same ratio, 240 with a 0.6 ratio. You get less of a slow on Lucent Singularity. And it's 3 seconds more on a cooldown. So, you know, it's about 40% more cooldown. About the same range. A little bit more range, but not much. So yeah, the harassment of Lux versus Vel'Koz, Vel'Koz shatters that one. In terms of their binding, her binding is better, but it's on a much longer cooldown. So this is something that you want to level up as her binding as Lux, whereas you level up the poke with Vel'Koz, I believe. So, you know, this goes 16 to 12 on the cooldown. This goes 15 to 11, so very similar. This is cheaper, I believe, 50 to 70. No, it's the same, 50 to 70. This has 850 range, though. This has 1175. So this is easier to hit than Vel'Koz's E, and it's a longer range, but it's a really long cooldown also. And I believe it does about the same damage. Was it 250 with 70? That does more. Decidedly more than this does. Now remember that every single one of Vel'Koz's abilities is damage also, whereas Lux's W is utility, it's a shield. And Vel'Koz's passive does more damage than this, because it's true damage, and his ultimate, if it channels through a bunch of people, does more damage than her ultimate. So if you like Lux, I get people that ask me about Lux support, I would highly recommend trying out Vel'Koz. He's better in virtually every way. Now, this is instant though, so that's a huge thing, is that you have to channel the Vel'Koz ult. So this is instant, and it's easier to chain together. It's easier to hit the Q than it is to hit the Vel'Koz E, but you don't have as much poke. So they are very different, but I would just say give Vel'Koz a try. I would prefer him over Lux as support. Although Lux does have her benefits in certain situations. So he's very, very cost efficient compared to other AP supports that harass. Great at shredding tanks. That true damage is going to cut not only right through magic resist, but that damage, that pesky damage resistance, right? So when Warwick, has 40% damage resistance, or Galio has 50% damage resistance off of his taunt, or whatever, you're just going to cut right through it like butter. It's not going to matter. Or that Alistar just popped his ult. He's running around thinking nobody's going to hurt him. You're going to hurt him. You're going to cut right through that damage resistance, because true damage doesn't care about Alistar ults. It doesn't care about Galio or Warwick. It just does the pure damage, cuts through all that nonsense. So really, really powerful against tanks. So this gives Vel'Koz extremely high team fight damage potential. He might have the highest potential damage in a team fight of any champion in the game. It's very, very close. It's hard to figure out how you can draw much more damage than a fully researched Vel'Koz ult that can potentially hit everybody. So it's a lot. I mean, maybe someone like Twitch, or like a hyper-fed Twitch, or a hyper-fed maybe Fiddlesticks. I mean, I want to look at Fiddle now really quick. Because I have people ask me about like a Fiddle ult also. Or like Fiddle as a support, because it seems like his ult does very heavy damage. Per second for 5 seconds. So that could deal up to 500 or 225% AP and 15 or 1625 damage. So 1625 magic damage plus 225% AP. So if you had like 300 AP or something, then it could deal more than a Vel'Koz with 200 AP. I don't know, though. That doesn't include the deconstruction procs. I still think that Vel'Koz is would deal more damage because of the deconstruction proc that you get in the middle of your ult, if you do it correctly. It also has a much longer range, has a much shorter cooldown, and you only have to channel it on people for 2.5 seconds versus this is 5 seconds. So I still think if you want a lot of damage from an AP, Fiddlesticks is like an iconic, blows everybody up, or Lux blows everybody up. But Vel'Koz does it even harder than those two do it. So that's good. He's great at killing Baron and Dragon. So like I said, you could actually channel your ult on a Baron or a Dragon, I think. You just melt the daylights out of that thing, potentially, if you really need to burn it down or try to steal with it. That's on the table, although I recommend holding your ult mostly for team fights. Okay, so he's great, but what are his weaknesses? Well, he's very difficult to play correctly. Every single one of his abilities is a skill shot. So there's no point click with Vel'Koz. You have to hit everything if you want to do well. So this means you have to practice him very well. And some of his stuff is really weird, like that plasma fission, and learning, like getting the timing of when you should break that properly if they fade down can be really tricky. Hitting these void rifts can be really hard to make sure you hit both procs on them to angle it, like try to guess which way they're going to run to dodge out of it. Tectonic disruption, this is kind of has a funky like move speed on it. It can be tricky to hit this also. And then of course the life form, once you start it, you can't really pivot that much. Like you can pivot a little bit, but you really want to make sure that you're ulting in the right spot and that you have a good position so that you don't have to cancel early. So it takes a lot of careful planning to use this ultimate correctly. Because, if you get crittered by a Lulu, or Nautilus hits you with a hook, or Blitz hits you with a hook, or anything like that, obviously that's going to be bad news. So you want to make sure that you're timing this correctly. So it takes quite a bit of game knowledge and quite a bit of mechanical skill to pull off the Vel'Koz stuff correctly. All right. And then we've got, so yeah, any squishy with very little escapes. He's very combo reliant. You have to chain your stuff together. You have to practice and understand the combos. And if anyone gets on you, you're going to die. So his good matchups, he's really good with Ashe. He's good with Jhin, Varus, Misfortune, Vi. So people who can lock other people down and make it easier for you to hit your skill shots. So anything with a lot of crowd control is going to be very good. I'd say the best, most popular one right now, pairing would be with Ashe. Yeah, probably Ashe. I mean, obviously he's going to do well with like Sejuani or a Mumu, or Zac. Zac is a popular jungler right now that he'd be good with. Maybe if Eve comes up and ults people. It's anyone else that has crowd control. So she's Vel'Koz is very good against other AP supports. So he's great against Zyra, Malzahar, Lulu, Thresh. He outranges all of these people, and it's very easy to bully him out in lane if you consistently hit your Qs. So he's going to have a hard time against engaged champions like Nautilus or, you know, just things that can get on you. Maybe Leona. Nami can knock you out of your ult. So there are some kind of rough matchups, but in general, she's good against other AP champions that you can outrange and bully out that don't have any innate sustain to them. So you're not really that great with things like Vayne, Twitch, or Ezreal, so things just don't have a lot of crowd control. They can't follow up if you harass in lane. They're going to need a lot of peel later on, because people are going to dive them. You just don't have a lot of peel. And they already, especially these two, they already have a ton of damage later in the game, so you don't really need to have all of that Vel'Koz damage. So, I mean, Ezreal, he's okay with Ezreal. He's okay with Ezreal, I suppose. Because you're slow, you know, once you hit him with your Q, Ezreal can hit him with his Q. So, it's okay with Ezreal. And Ezreal does have low damage. I'll go ahead and take that off. Ezreal does have low damage, so having a little bit of extra damage would be nice. So you're going to be bad against things that just completely erase you, that have a ton of burst damage, and that have a lot of mobility. So Hecarim, Kha'Zix, Echo, LeBlanc, Riven, say Rengar. LeBlanc's kind of out of the meta right now, but Rengar would be someone. So recommended items. Leandri's Torment, definitely. Eye of the Watchers, definitely. Void Staff is interesting. It does give you the extra penetration, but keep in mind that if you're doing your deconstruction correct, your ultimate's going to be doing true damage, so that penetration's not going to matter if you land good ultimates. Abyssal Scepter is another one that's interesting. He didn't use it, but you have to be kind of in close to debuff people, but if you have a bunch of divers on your AD carry, then this could be useful, especially if you have other AP champions on your team, like a Zac or an Echo that don't have it yet. Abyssal can be a useful item. Lock of the Iron Solari is something that he really liked. I can see why he likes it. It's an extremely powerful spell or ability. Redemption is okay, but he's not going to benefit from the plus healing. He doesn't really need the health as much. And it requires a 2-second wind up. So it's just not as fast as Locket. And Locket does give you some decent defensive stats. So I do like the Locket. I want to try that out now. I want to try out the Watchers Leandri's Locket combo and see if that works. I think that'd be pretty good. Now he gets Sork boots all the time, which is obviously the best damage boots you can get. But especially if you're trying him out in lower elos, I highly recommend Boots of Swiftness. Potentially, like, you're going to lose some damage off of that, but you can't do damage if you're dead. So if you're out of position and they catch you, or you can't reposition to ult fast enough and they kill your team before you get off a good ult, then that's going to be really bad. So losing the extra 15 penetration hurts, but being able to position for better ults will ultimately give you higher DPS in the long run, and it will keep you safe because you're not going to die as much. And it actually gives you, like, some kind of escape. So you might actually get away if you're trying to ward and that Grave shows up, like jumps over the wall at you, you might actually be able to get away without dying because you're going to be a little bit faster. So that's what I recommend, is Boost of Swiftness if you play at a lower elo or you're just kind of practicing and you're a novice Vel'Koz player. And then once you get a bit more experience, or if you play in higher elo and you just need a bit more damage, then Sork boots are a good option. You definitely want to go with 9 magic penetration reds. That's easy. Go with 9 HP yellows. If you don't have the IP, you can go with flat armor. I think he uses flat armor a lot. It's very similar in laning phase. Just a matter of preference. The armor is going to protect you against physical damage more, and the HP is going to protect you against magic damage more. So they're very close. They're practically interchangeable. Blues, you're going to want flat ability power and flat ability power quintessences. Penetration is okay, but then once again, remember that your deconstruction and your ultimate already have true damage built into them, so the penetration is going to be wasted on them. And the flat AP contributes to your passive. So remember that your passive scales, the true damage scales off of AP. So you want to get AP as much as possible. Penetration is okay on Vel'Koz, but AP is really where you want to be if you're going to get an offensive stat. Leandri's is a special case because you're getting that primarily for its passive and its synergy with your slow on your Q. So the fact that it does penetration is just a nice bonus, but you're getting Leandri's for the Leandri's passive, not necessarily for the penetration. So that's kind of different from Zyra, in that Zyra wants like maximum penetration because of all of the really high flat damage she has on her stuff, whereas Vel'Koz has really high flat damage on his true, because already has really high penetration because of his true damage, so he wants flat AP to boost up his the flat damage that he does. In other words, he doesn't need penetration as much as Zyra does, although it's nice on him. Then I recommend Deathfire Touch for the reasons I described. He has Thunderlords. You know, I'd love to get his reasoning on that. I think it's for early game pressure and early game power, but I think that Deathfire is way better later in the game, especially when you're casting that ultimate across a lot of people. It's very powerful. Okay, we'll try to speed this up a little bit. I'm going to try to stream a little bit tonight. It's going to be like a super late stream. Maybe I just shouldn't even do it, but I'll just do like maybe a few hours. So a popular comparison. So Vel'Koz versus Zyra. Vel'Koz has more uptime on his harass. You don't have to wait on plants. You can just keep spamming your Q. You have longer ranges. You have more potential for damage. If you do get a bunch of true damage on people in fights, you have safer wave clear with your W. Zyra, if she wants to wave clear, has to use her E, which is also her only snare that she has. That's your only defense against a gank. I guess you can use your Q plus plants, but Vel'Koz's W is going to clear the wave faster, and it doesn't use his escape mechanism, which is his E. So that's really nice that you have safer, faster wave clear. And you're great at breaking tanks. So you're good against Alistar, Galio, Warwick, anything else that just has something that reduces a lot of damage. It's not necessarily armor. That would perhaps be immune to physical or armor penetration. It's not immune to the true damage. So that makes him particularly good against the super tanks out there. And then from the Zyra side, Zyra's going to have more initial burst damage. You have to channel Vel'Koz's damage. You have to go through the combos and proc your passive. Zyra has more reliable poke. So casting a Q on somebody with a W is almost certainly going to deal a good chunk of damage to him. Whereas Vel'Koz has to consistently hit his Qs, which are harder to hit. So Vel'Koz can harass more, like more uptime on his harass, but it's harder to hit. So that's just kind of how that balances out. Zyra has better bush potential, so you can all-in 100 to 0 somebody with Zyra in like less than 1 second with your ult up. You just E, plant, ult, auto, and they're dead, probably. So it's like 1 second or less, depending on how much AP you have. Whereas with Vel'Koz, it's going to take a while. So you're going to have to, try to E them, W, Q, ult. And, then you have to channel your ult for probably at least a second. So it's going to take at least 50% to 100% more time to 100 to 0 somebody as Vel'Koz, potentially. So Zyra's much better. And they can flash out of your ult. They can't really flash out of Zyra plants in her ult once you hit them with the E. So Zyra's better at just like blowing up people instantly. Zyra also has probably higher sustained Baron damage with her plants. Like, depending on how many plants you get on the Baron with your Leandries, I think that can shred it faster than potentially Vel'Koz. It depends on if Vel'Koz uses his ultimate on the Baron or not, probably. But there's similar damage to objectives, but I think that Zyra's going to do a little bit more. Now, Vel'Koz versus Brand. This is another popular comparison. I already compared to Lux a little bit, and why I think he's better than Lux. But in terms of Brand, Vel'Koz has more same stuff. Up here, same stuff applies to Brand. Now, Brand's similarities are going to be he has stronger early game pressure. Your level 2 is much harder as Brand. If you land your W plus your Q on somebody, that's going to be a lot of damage. If you land your full combo, that's a lot of damage in lane. So I think that Brand is better in the laning phase for actually pressuring for kills. He has similar teamfight potential if people are grouped up and you land an awesome Brand ult. That can be similar to if you land an awesome Vel'Koz ult. But Vel'Koz is better against taking out, 1 or 2 targets than Brand is, typically. And he can do it from a much longer range, although he has to channel it, whereas Brand, can just panic button, press it, and just throw it out there, even if you're about to die and do a ton of damage. Vel'Koz has to position better and channel it, but I think his damage is a bit more reliable than Brand's. Brand has easier to hit skill shots, and he has higher single target burst in lane when you don't have your ultimate, or you choose not to use your ultimate. So Brand's okay. I still probably favor Vel'Koz in most situations. Did I not pull up? I thought I pulled up that game. Maybe I exited out of it. I'll pull it up here in a second. But how do you lane? So this is how you lane as Vel'Koz. You want to spam your Q, try to weaken enemies, try to double cast your Q as enemies fade forward. So they're probably going to fade forward on you. You want to double cast your Q, to make sure it hits them. The range of your Q should be long enough to zone a lot of people. So even if you're not hitting people a lot, you're keeping them off your AD carry. And you're basically making it a free farm lane in a worse situation a lot of the times. Because they're going to be scared to run into you, or they're going to eat a Q to the face. You can push the wave with your W and harass them under tower. If your ally hits crowd control, then you can follow your E with your E full combo, which is your W, E, Q, W. And that should proc two of your passives on them. You want to save your E for an all-in. So that's your only way to escape. So don't just use your E to just try to go for a harass. You need to keep that in case a gank comes. So don't use your E unless you're fairly sure that it's going to be an all-in and you're going to kill him. Just use your Q. Then if you slow him with your Q, you can go for a W if you want. But that's going to eat through your mana really quickly before you come back with any Fairy Charm items. So just be careful if you do that before your first back. I recommend before you get your first back, just spam your W and just try to hit it as much as you can, unless they start an all-in fight with you. Don't use your flash offensively. Vel'Koz is not the champion to do that with. You don't have any other escapes. If you don't have a flash, you're going to die a lot, bottom lane. So you need to be very, very conservative with your flash. Even if you think it's going to get you a kill, just don't do it. Like, maybe if it's like 100%, like you are going to kill them, they're out of summoners, and they're just one auto attack away, then maybe you can flash forward and kill. But it's really, really dangerous. So just try your best not to use your flash, because you just don't have any other escapes. You know, if you have to flash with Janna to make a play or something, it's like, whatever, that's bad, but it's not the end of the world because you have so many escapes and you're so fast anyways with Janna. But with Vel'Koz, if you waste your flash, it's a big deal. As soon as you hit level 6, you should be trying to full combo and kill people. If you're pairing him with the right people, like a Jhin or an Ashe, something that has crowd control, then that's going to be a perfect combo to all-in kill people at level 6. So be sure that you're positioning in a safe place to ult. Make sure that Lulu can't W you. Make sure that Nami's not going to wave you fast enough. Make sure that Vel'Koz or Nautilus or Blitzcrank is not going to hook you. Just be sure that you're in a safe place when you start channeling your ult if you can. It has a huge range, so make sure you're playing really far back. And just be careful with enemy crowd control and jungler flanks. Okay, so I've got a video here really quickly of just some Vel'Koz laning. I thought I had it pulled up, but I'll grab it here. Let's see. This one? No. There we go. Okay. Alright, so I've got it muted. And I've got some specific moments picked out for you here that I just want to show you in terms of laning and team fighting. So the next section we're going to talk about team fighting. But I'll just show it all right here for you. Alright, so fast forward a little bit. Watch kind of some laning patterns here. Just level 1, we're getting pushed in. Alright, so you saw how I split that early. It was going to hit here. And because I threw it basically straight at her when she tried to fade down, then I split it early and did damage to her. So Lux is doing some decent harass here. So I'm taking too many hits from Caitlyn. I was trying to angle to get a Q, but I should have just given that up. Yeah, and pop a biscuit. Lux is annoying by throwing that stuff, but she's almost out of mana. If we get a look at her mana bar here in a second. See, she's running out of mana a lot faster than I am. Because her spells are way more expensive. Okay. Alright, this looks like an all-in. Go ahead and slow it down. Let me back up just a little bit here. Okay. Missed that. Got this warded here. Now this is very unfortunate. That ward literally ran out like the exact moment this fight started. I had that warded. And it literally ran out right there. And I don't have any more wards. Okay, so I throw a Q at her. It just came off cooldown. Back up just a little bit more here. Okay, so that ward's there. It's about to time out. Okay, so watch how this goes down. Okay, so they start fighting. We dodge all the stuff. Lucian looks like he wants to go hard. So my Q just comes off cooldown. I throw a W in there first. Because I can't see where she is. And then I throw my Q. So W first, then Q. Hit her with all of it, and you're going to see it proc here in a second. Boom. That's that passive. The passive just knocked out like a quarter of her health. I exhaust her. As soon as I get in close, auto-attacking. She flashes. Just autoing. Do another W. 1 stack. 2 stacks. Try to go for the... Did I go for the E there? I don't have E skilled. It's only level 2. Okay. Auto. I got exhausted. Throw my W. Straight at her. Boom. Got it. Notice I held my flash that whole time. I did not flash after her. I was like, I'm going to go for this 1 Q. If I miss the Q, then I could think about flashing, but I probably wouldn't because they have too many minions here. So then I managed to hit her. Kill her. Run away because I can't fight Lux and that many minions. And then we just reset. So it's just going for the Q harassment. As soon as they decided they wanted to go all in, I just try to get that deconstruction proc as fast as I possibly can. So I throw the W, then the Q, procs deconstruction, auto. As soon as I can, throw another W, get 2 procs on her, and then Q. So even if she had some more damage there, or some more health to give, I could have overkilled her by, you know, probably about 150 HP. Because I procced 1 more deconstruction on her. At the end there. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. I've got a another section. This is when a gank comes into lane, how you can handle ganks. Okay. So we're setting up here. Continuing our same harassment patterns. We're ahead. It's 2-1-1. We've got Graves coming in hot. It's kind of hanging back. Alright, they see him. It's coming up. Kind of dangerous. We don't know where Zach is. Okay, so they take a lot of damage. They're going really hard. Zach's flying in. See that now. Lucian's going hard. Okay, so I'm thinking we're staying back. I'm staying really far back, and I'm going to try to blow him up. Because Lux could hit with a bind. Zach is almost certainly going to ult as soon as he lands. And I just want to make sure I don't get caught up in all that. Okay, so he ults. I do a tectonic disruption. I'm just trying to hit. I throw it right there to try to hit the Zach. So that's my E to stop him from going forward. He knocked him out of the Lux laser. Then I throw my W right towards that huge mess of people. Throw the W max range towards the Caitlyn. Okay. So I clipped her with the W, and then I clipped her with my ult here for the kill. And I'm just channeling it through the Zach, and then I'm going to also channel it through the Lux here. Okay, I just got a deconstruction proc. You see the 3rd proc here. Boom, knocks him out. We got 2 procs here. Got that 3rd proc for that true damage there. Alright, and now what I want to do, I've got a W coming up. I only have 1 W. I want to wait until his stuff gets close together so that I proc. I'm going to try to proc the deconstruction on multiple blobs. Wait a second until they all kind of clump back up together. There, throw it on all of them. Get the procs. And then I'm going to throw in, get the true damage on him. It's not quite enough to kill him, but it gets him really, really low when he reconstructs. I could have exhausted there. I still think Lucian was going to die. Yeah, it's a team fight, though. So just throw your E, try to hit whoever's diving, your team. Throw your W out, try to throw it towards as many people as you can, back up, and then throw a Q, and then ult. And then just channel it on, prioritize the closest threat, and then if you can hit it on multiple targets, you can. So you saw I was trying to do everything I could to get that Zach off of them. And then I just happened to hit the Caitlyn, too, when I threw it through the Zach. Okay? And then one final one, just a good team fight here. A late game team fight. Alright, so we've got our Leandries. Working our way forward. We have good vision. Alright, we can see there's probably going to be a fight here. All right, Ari's in really deep. We know Zed's bottom. So we know we can fight this. We have good vision around here. So we know this is a safe place where I'm not going to get flanked. So we've got vision. All right, Fizz is about to hit his ult. Okay. So I'm going to throw a W here. Try to get some procs on some people. Throw my Q. Try to get some more procs. Then you notice how I immediately fade away. So I run out of that fight. Off to the right. So I ran behind this little wall here. You can't see it just yet because I was watching this screen. But I faded behind this wall out of vision. And then I went max range, life form, disintegration ray after I already threw my other abilities. Just trying to channel it over the closest target once again, which is the Zac. Trying to hold it on the Fizz. Come walking out from where I was. I guess I wasn't all the way over, but I was like over here. I was really close to the edge. Trying to throw my E and a W where I think he's going to run so he can't get to the Ari. Boom. Got him. Lights out. Okay, so we're just running back, playing really far back, using all of our abilities, and then just channeling our ult over the biggest threat that's closest to us, or that's hitting a priority ranged target. Okay. Let's get back in here and finish this up. So yeah, that's basically how you team fight. You want to stand very far back, use your maximum ranges as much as possible, poke from afar, wait until other people get engaged, wait until the enemy is distracted by what you're doing. Save your E to peel a diver, so I held on to my E most of the time there, just in case, you know, Zed comes up or one of them tries to flash onto me. If your team engages, you know, try to land your QW ult if you can. I always throw in W first, then Q, and then ult. That's fine too. Yeah, like I said, just hold on to your E. Be sure that you're in a safe position to channel your ult. So you saw me reposition behind a wall there, out of vision. Anytime you can run outside the fog of war, just run behind a little wall, run into a bush. Just anything you can do to make it difficult for them to see it coming and to make it difficult for them to get over to you, to stop you. Is really good, because if you're behind a wall like that, like I was in this clip early on, and let's say they had like a Nautilus or something, then the Nautilus is gonna, you know, hook the wall first. There's some skill shots that won't go through walls, and you know, if you're just maximum distance, it just makes it really hard to get to you. Okay, well, that's going to be it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you want to know more guides, I have a Zyra guide, a Nami guide, and a Janna guide available so far. So be sure to check those out also. I think I have a fourth one as well. Let me see. Who am I blanking out on here? I'm about to add the Vel'Koz guide, a Lulu guide also. So check out the guides. Those are all awesome. They're very similar in format to this. This one is a little bit longer than some of the other ones, but not that much. They're all about an hour and 20 minutes or so. Just good detailed guides. Also, I offer coaching videos, so if you want to see that, you can check that out as well. If you want some more individualized help to really put you over the top, help you gain a lot of ELO and appreciation for the game, I offer that service. It's a $20 donation if you'd like that. I can click on one of those really quick and just kind of show you what that's all about. Fighting this. I'll go ahead and mute it, so you can flip through and see what you think about it. But I do offer a Google Doc for that, like I talked about in the beginning of this video, where I go over your masteries, your runes, look at your op.gg, just like I did for the guy in this video. Give you some good pointers and tips there. I do an initial game plan, so I talk about, you know, what's probably going to happen in this lane, stuff you should watch out for, stuff you should be doing as the game unfolds, how team fights are probably going to go down at the end of the game, and the best things you can do to probably win the game. This is before I watch any of the game. So I just kind of talk about stuff that you should be thinking about during Champion Select as you work your way through. And then finally, I watch the video itself, do lots of take lots of notes for you, and then at the very end, give you 5 or 6 different things that you could work on to help you improve. So they're really very helpful. The people that I've coached so far have all said that they've loved it. They've gotten a lot of great results out of it. So be sure to check that out. And the guides, I do release guides periodically, just kind of on my own, stuff that I'm interested in covering. But if you have a very specific champion that you would like for me to do a guide for, I know that Corbin sponsored the Nami guide. He said that he might also want a Morgana guide soon, so we'll see if he's interested in that. But I will release some more guides on some of my favorite champions and some powerful picks that I think over time as well. These guides take about 4 hours to do, so it's quite a lot of work, but I know people really enjoy them and get a lot out of them. It takes, about hour and 30 minutes or so to record it. It takes about another hour to research, hour or two, depending, to research and design the Google Doc. Then, another hour or so to upload. And then another hour to process and put in the timestamps and all that good stuff. So it's a pretty arduous process, but it's definitely worth it. I hope you enjoy the high quality content. If you want me to do a guide over your favorite champions, $20 donation, I'll give you a shout out, immortalize you on the channel, and give you the best possible information that I can for that guide. So thanks again to Seth for sponsoring this guide. And hopefully I'll have some more guides out for you soon. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time.